Greetings YouTube viewers and welcome to another video on the Ian Bullock channel. Today is Monday the 5th of September 2022 and we find ourselves yet again at Gorleston-On-Sea, Great Yarmouth, Norfolk on the east coast of East Anglia. And we're starting off this video at Marine Parade and its junction with Avondale Road. Today I want to talk to you about the triumphs and tragedies of Norfolk's grandest seaside hotels. So the reason I've started this video here in Avondale Road, Gorleston, is because this is the road that I grew up in from the age of about 6 in 1969 to when I was 18 in 1982 and left home to live in Norwich and work for the Eastern Daily Press. But most of my childhood was spent down in this area, enjoying the seaside, the seafront, going in the sea and the swimming pool, and it was a really lovely place in which to grow up back in the 1970s and the early 80s. So here at the top of Cliff Hill, overlooking the sea, we have the Cliff Hotel, which is now one of Gorleston's sort of premier hotels, really. It's been there an awfully long time, since Victorian times, and has more recently survived the pandemic. And there's been quite a lot of investment there, and it's expanded as well. So that's going very successfully. But I just want to focus a little bit on this area next door to the Cliff Hotel, because here we have a social housing scheme called Grenfell Court. Now I can't really work out how long this has been here for, but I'm going to guess 1970s, 80s, and as I understand it, Grenfell Court is a social housing scheme for over 55s, and this site obviously affords a rather fantastic view out across the sea and the seafront here at Gorleston. So here we have the top of the cliffs here at Gorleston, and looking down onto the beach and the yacht pond down on the seafront at Gorleston here in Norfolk. And if I just swing you round here, you'll be able to get a good look at the area at the top of the cliffs here, which is Grenfell Court, and the Cliff Hotel just tucked behind it. A little bit weedy and overgrown here, but this is Grenfell Court, perched at the top of the cliffs, and that overlooks the shops and the car park and down onto the beach here on the seafront. So I'm currently just down on the promenade at Gorleston, looking back up at the top of the cliffs at Grenfell Court. Now, one of the interesting things about Grenfell Court is it has this kind of prime position up on the cliff tops, and obviously it's probably a very, very nice place in which to live, so I've no criticism of it in that respect. But I think people would agree that the architecture of Grenfell Court is a little bit dull, really. Unprepossessing, I think, is the word I'd use for it. It's perfectly functional, and as I said, it's probably a happy and lovely community in which to live. But the fact of the matter is that for such a commanding position up on the cliffs, you would have thought that maybe a big, premier, prestigious hotel would be located there. And that's where our story begins, with the triumphs and the tragedies of Norfolk's grand seaside hotels. So if you'd been standing here around about 1898 onwards towards the First World War, things would have been completely different here, because where Grenfell Court now stands, there actually used to be the old Cliff Hotel, and that was an incredible looking building. And I'm just going to show you some pictures now of what the original Cliff Hotel looked like back in the days of the late Victorians and Edwardians. So this is it, folks. This is the original Cliff Hotel that used to stand at the top of the cliffs overlooking the shops and beach at Gorleston, and I think you'll agree that this was a building that had a wow factor with a capital W. Such an amazing site back in the day. So the architect behind this spectacular hotel was George Skipper of Norwich, and I'll talk a little bit more about him and his work as this video goes on. So, how on earth do we describe this building? Well, with those fairy tale turrets, it almost looks like something out of Disneyland, Sleeping Beauty's palace. This building was kind of Bavaria meets Bohemia meets Brigadoon meets Balmoral. This wasn't just some bucket and spade seaside hotel. It looks to me more like some kind of glorious Scottish hunting lodge, or something you'd find on the banks of the River Rhine. The original Cliff Hotel cost £25,000 to build, probably millions of pounds in today's money, and it opened in July 1898. It had 139 bedrooms and made quite an impression at a time when Gorleston was really expanding during the late Victorian period. One of the things I really love about this old colourised photograph postcard of Gorleston is it shows how little the beach area has changed over the years. On the right we have the Pier Hotel, which is still very much here today. Also in the centre, the red brick Gorleston Pavilion Theatre still stands, but unfortunately the old Cliff Hotel up on the cliffs is no longer part of the seaside scene. So this fine figure of a fellow with a magnificent moustache was George Skipper, the architect behind the Cliff Hotel at Gorleston, as well as a whole range of other projects across East Anglia. He was born in Dereham, he attended the Norwich School of Art, and he trained in London to be an architect and spent most of his working life working in Norwich. George Skipper's Cliff Hotel was opened in 1898, and one of its most famous visitors was the Prince of Wales, the future King Edward VII. Unfortunately, this building only survived for 17 years because on Boxing Day 1915, during the First World War, a fire broke out in a bedroom and quickly spread across the whole building, fanned by a strong southwesterly gale. Now, despite heroic efforts by local people to try and stop the blaze, the hotel was soon reduced to a shell which had to be demolished and the site cleared. And that, tragically, was the end of the original Cliff Hotel at Gorleston. So the sad irony, of course, about the loss of the Cliff Hotel and the fire is that it happened during the First World War but had nothing to do with enemy action. This was some kind of accident in a bedroom. The whole building was destroyed, apart from the annex and the older houses at the side, which were then used to form what has now become the new Cliff Hotel up on the Gorleston cliff top. Such a sad end for a beautiful hotel. Now, the building that we're seeing here is the Gorleston Pavilion Theatre. This was another elegant Victorian building, built in 1898, the same as the Cliff Hotel, but not one of George Skipper's. This was designed by the borough engineer J.W. Cockrell, and that's a real asset to Gorleston and still going strong. But if I just swing you round here, you'll be able to see the current Cliff Hotel, up on the top of the cliffs with its glass dining terrace, and next to it, of course, the social housing scheme Grenfell Court. And that old photograph I've just dropped in there is by way of a kind of now and then comparison. You'll be able to see what the site looked like around about the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. One of the Cliff Hotel's most distinguished residents in its early days was Dr. Wilfred Grenfell. He was something of a maverick, pioneering doctor who became celebrated as a national hero in Canada for his work helping the people of Newfoundland with the setting up of children's homes, first aid posts and hospitals, as well as encouraging local people to grow vegetables to help combat disease. And of course his name was later used for Grenfell Court, the social housing scheme, which has since replaced the original Cliff Hotel. So here's another view of the majestic Cliff Hotel with the row of shops and their sun canopies underneath, and down on the sand a group of donkeys having a well-earned rest. I'm just really pleased that after that tragic fire of 1915, that the Cliff Hotel was able to settle into new premises and to grow into a successful and flourishing business. A lot of the information for this video has been taken from the Cliff Hotel's website, and I wish them well for the future. Okay, YouTube viewers, so we've just left Gorleston behind briefly, and I brought you up here to Cromer on the North Norfolk coast, and I'm standing at the moment on Cromer's famous Victorian Edwardian Pier, because I wanted to show you the building right in front of us here, which really dominates this whole area of the seafront here at Cromer, which is the Hotel de Paris, Hotel de Paris, Hotel de Paris, call it what you like. It's a very large landmark hotel that overlooks the pier, and the reason I've brought you up here is because this is another one of George Skipper's architectural masterpieces which he created here in East Anglia. So I wanted to show you this hotel here in Cromer by George Skipper because it has the same kind of dominant position over the seafront and the sea as I think the old Cliff Hotel used to back in its day in Gorleston, and I hope that this video gives you some sense of the sort of landmark status that the Cliff Hotel would have had up on the cliffs above Gorleston seafront back in its heyday. So I was born in Cromer, and I've lived here on and off over the years, including a stint between 1985 and 1989 when I worked as the Deputy Chief Reporter for the North Norfolk News and Eastern Daily Press at the Cromer office of Eastern Counties newspapers, and I thought I had a really good knowledge of Cromer. And I'd always been under the misapprehension that the Hotel de Paris, Hotel de Paris, really got its name from just some sort of fanciful thing where back in the Victorian Edwardian times, I think it was quite fashionable to name hotels after exotic continental locations, maybe giving them a sort of Gallic charm, Riviera touch feel. And I just assumed that someone had given it that name just to add a little bit of continental glamour to the place. But what I hadn't realised was that in fact the Hotel de Paris has genuine French connections dating right back to when it first started around about 1830. So this is the view looking out to sea from the front of the Hotel de Paris, looking out over Cromer's famous pier and the North Sea. And if I just swing round here, you'll see the imposing decorative frontage of the Hotel de Paris, George Skipper's grand design for the site overlooking Cromer seafront. It has Grade 2 listed status, and really a beautiful building there with the ornamentation on it, the balconies, the lovely window structures, decorative roof line, and also those cupulas or cupolas, those little domes at the top, which I believe are copper and therefore have that kind of verdigris patina on them. So I think that back in its day this would have been a real statement hotel for Victorian and Edwardian visitors to the town, and such a lovely important position here in Cromer town centre, and I think it retains that lovely glamour from the past. So back in 1820 this was the site of a large house owned by Lord Suffield, and by 1830 the beginnings of the Hotel de Paris had been created. Now that was created by this man called, with a very French name, Pier Lefrançois, who was really from an aristocratic family. His father was Baron Delbar, and interestingly they were a French family who were escaping the mobs of the French Revolution around about 1799, and they came to Cromer and really became entrepreneurs back in the day, and really for the rest of their lives they were effectively exiled here after the French Revolution. So back in 1830 Pierre Lefrançois and his wife started their own hotel, which initially was being run as a boarding house, but by 1845 records show that it was actually named as the Hotel de Paris, and I assume that that was really a tribute to the French capital. And they ran it very successfully. Unfortunately, Pier himself died in the 1840s and I believe is buried in Cromer churchyard, but at the time it was catering for the many visitors who were coming to the area to enjoy the seawater and the fresh air here in North Norfolk. So in the late 1880s the railways had arrived in Cromer, and so there were even more visitors coming here with the ease of access to the North Norfolk coast. Now by that stage George Skipper was designing several impressive hotels around East Anglia, including here in Cromer, for hoteliers, and I think at the time the then owner Alex Jarvis decided that the original Hotel de Paris needed to be refreshed and, well, basically replaced, so he commissioned George Skipper to work his architectural magic with this site, and Skipper came up with this fantastic design, which I think on gloomy, stormy days has an almost kind of Gothic appeal to it, really. But yes, an amazing building, and it's now become one of the most well-known landmarks here in Cromer on the Norfolk coast. So I'm going off at a slight tangent here, folks, but I just wanted to show you this painting which I bought a few years ago at the gallery in Church Street, Cromer. A painting by the local artist Leon Bunwell, or Bunnewell, Bunnewell, and Leon was a local artist who could often be seen out and about on the beaches and promenades of North Norfolk, capturing these beautiful local scenes. And I was sad to read that Leon died in 2021. Now, Leon usually painted out and about in all weathers outdoors, and captured these scenes very quickly. I think he was a very rapid painter, and people used to gather around his easel and watch what he was doing, and his aim was always to try and capture the moment, the emotion of the moment, the spirit of the scene, rather than with any particular accuracy. And I think this is a great example. If you look down here at the people on Cromer Pier and the entrance to the pier, quite heavy-handed, a sort of naive impressionistic technique, I'd say. But when you stand back, you can see exactly what the scene is. And anyone who stood on Cromer Pier, like I did earlier in this video, will recognise this very familiar scene looking back at the town centre and the Hotel de Paris from down on Cromer Pier. So far, I've shown you what the Hotel de Paris looks like in 2022. And also how it's been captured in that lovely painting. But you might be asking, what did the hotel actually look like back in its heyday? Well, here it is in this amazing photograph, which we think was taken around about the year 1900. And I suppose this photograph just goes to show how little the area around the beach and pier at Cromer has changed over such a long period. In the foreground we have these little figures dressed in their Victorian and Edwardian outfits, strolling along the pier almost like ghosts from the past. Then we have the Hotel de Paris itself, set above those familiar zigzag slopes. This building probably only would have been about 5 years old when this photograph was taken, so a relatively new building. And down on the pier itself, it's really interesting to note how uncluttered the original entrance was, because nowadays in 2022, the entrance to Cromer Pier has become very elaborate. So I'm hoping you've learnt something there. Even people who think they know Cromer quite well might not realise that the Hotel de Paris does have genuine French connections, and I know that a lot of the Pier Show comedians in the summer Pier Show at the Pavilion Theatre used to call it the Hotel de Paris. They'd say, I've been put up during the summer season at the Hotel de Paris. Anyway, it's the Hotel de Paris, Hotel de Paris, and not the Hotel de Paris. But yeah, it has genuine French connections from its days when Pierre Lefrançois and his wife founded it back in the 1800s. So at the minute I'm just up near Runton Road here in Cromer, which is probably the best known road for hotels up here in this resort, the road that leads to East and West Runton and onwards to Sheringham. The reason I've come up here, and I hope that my Gorleston viewers are still following all this, is because this is the Sandcliffe Hotel, which is yet another example of George Skipper's architecture. I think this one is 1894, something like that. So it's this kind of arts and crafts style of architecture with red bricks, ornamental brickwork, and then these inset napped flint panels. I suppose flint from the beach here down in Cromer in North Norfolk. So yes, there are these decorative panels all over the place, and yet again, a bit like the Hotel de Paris, another interesting decorative building. So George Skipper obviously had this very distinctive architectural style, and hoteliers back in the late 1890s were obviously very keen to get him on board as the sort of go-to architect, I suppose, back in that era. And this one is the Sandcliffe Hotel, now seems to be called the Sandcliffe Guest House. But yes, has this very, very attractive frontage with a lot of ornamentation on it, and sort of arts and crafts feel really, and very, very representative of Skipper's style. And just coming along next to the Sandcliffe Guest House, we have probably one of the best known hotels here in Cromer, the Cliftonville Hotel along the Runton Road, which actually has been bought by new owners in the last year or so, a London-based pub and hotel chain. It used to be owned by private local individuals. Back in my day, in the 1980s, it was Tom Bolton and his wife Vivian, I believe she was called, and they ran it for many years. And this is yet another George Skipper masterpiece with all that typical ornamentation and decoration on it. What I really like about the Cliftonville is this use of so many different sort of turrets and windows, balconies, and this really eclectic mix of sort of Dutch bell gables, step gables, pediments, towers. So much going on there. It's almost as if he threw everything into the architectural mix with this one. And he wasn't the original architect of this building in 1894, but I believe about 4 years later, George Skipper was called in to oversee a sort of quite a major facelift and refurbishment and expansion of this hotel. And he created what we have here today, which is a very, very interesting and distinctive building. And as I say, really one of the best known landmarks here along the Runton Road in Cromer. I'm just going to take you a little bit further along Runton Road now, because I want to show you what used to be one of George Skipper's, probably one of his pride and joy projects, which actually is no longer standing, unlike the Cliftonville Hotel that we see in front of us here. So I started this video originally by talking about Gorleston and the long lost Cliff Hotel, designed of course by George Skipper and now no longer a part of the cliff top at Gorleston. And we've got a touch of the Gorlestons going on here, because what you see in front of us back in the 1890s, 1891 onwards, would have been the Grand Hotel. And that was a real sort of ambitious project for George Skipper back at the time. He'd already designed Cromer's very ornamental town hall, and also a hotel called the Hotel Metropole in Tucker Street, which actually I think burnt down and has since been replaced by the shops and flats that run along the back of Cromer Parish Church, De Vere Court I think that's called. But here on this site he built the Grand Hotel, very, very big and expensive project, which looked a bit like this. So what you just saw there was the Grand Hotel in all its sort of Victorian Edwardian grandeur, but unfortunately in 1969, having been renamed the Albany Hotel, the thing promptly burnt down and had to be demolished. It was burnt, really destroyed beyond repair. And on the site here we have Albany Court, named after the Albany Hotel, and these flats really aren't in keeping with anything along the seafront here, but I do like them. They've got a particular sort of nice feel about them, and they always look very neat and tidy. So that used to be the site of the Grand Hotel here at Cromer, one of George Skipper's most ambitious projects, but now no longer a part of the seafront scene here at Cromer in North Norfolk. So George John Skipper, 1856 to 1948, was, as I say, a leading Norwich-based architect of the late Victorian and Edwardian periods. Now, writer and poet John Betjeman said that he was to Norwich what Gaudi was to Barcelona, and that was certainly quite an accolade for a local architect. I certainly had no idea that George Skipper had had such an influence on the building styles of Norwich, Norfolk and beyond until I started researching this video. He, of course, was the brains behind the beautiful Cliff Hotel at Gorleston, but maybe not so many people realise that he also designed Norwich's best-known department store, Gerald's, and his offices in Norwich were in that little red brick building just at the side there on the right of the picture. And George Skipper, of course, was involved in other important Norwich city centre projects. He was the man who came up with the arts and crafts design for the fabulous Royal Arcade, which back in its day would have been the most exclusive and fashionable place to shop for the gentry of Norfolk. And George Skipper was obviously an architect who could meet any brief with great precision, because when the Norwich Union Life Insurance Society asked him to design its new headquarters, Surrey House in Surrey Street, Norwich, the business wanted something that suggested a solid, reassuring and responsible way to approach business. He came up with this Palladian style, almost like a Roman temple, to match the brief perfectly, and the building is still there, as elegant as ever in 2022. Skipper also had a hand in the design of Seaside hotels in Suffolk. This is the handsome Victoria Hotel, which is along the southern end of the cliff tops at Lowestoft, looking out to sea, and bears many of his architectural hallmarks. In his lifetime, of course, Skipper was involved in numerous architectural projects, and this video has only really taken a brief look at some of them, but they've included the lovely Hotel de Paris in Cromer, overlooking the beach and pier in North Norfolk. Also the Sandcliffe Hotel, with those distinctive flint panels using flint pebbles taken from down on the beach at Cromer. Then, of course, there was that truly ambitious Skipper project, the Grand Hotel up on the cliffs at Cromer, which unfortunately, like the Cliff Hotel at Gorleston, ended up being burnt down in a tragic fire. I've also talked about the Cliftonville Hotel on Runton Road, Cromer, which is still today very much a flourishing and successful business. And I recall that for many years it was run by hotelier Tom Bolton and his wife, who I think was called Monica. Her name has just come back to me. And I seem to think that their daughter Olive ran a hotel in Cromer as well, and was very much a spokesman for the Hotel and Guest House Association in North Norfolk for many years. So that's about it really from Gorleston here in Norfolk. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope that you've enjoyed a little tour of some of George Skipper's fantastic hotels. Such a shame that we lost the original Cliff Hotel here at Gorleston to fire back in 1915, because you'll have seen from those old photographs what a fabulous sight it was, perched up on the cliff top here. But anyway, that's the changing face of Gorleston. Thank you for watching. Please keep following the Ian Bullock channel. It is Monday the 5th of September 2022, and this is Ian Bullock saying goodbye from Gorleston.